أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إنا أعطيناك الكوثر فصل لربك وانحر إن شانئك هو الأبتر. صدق الله العلي العظيم.
حسین غم میں تیرے کائنات روتی ہے، حسین غم میں تیرے کائنات روتی ہے، نکل کے روتا ہے دن چھپ کے رات روتی ہے، حسین غم میں تیرے کائنات روتی ہے، پلانے پانی چلے جب حسین اصغر کو، پلانے پانی چلے جب حسین اصغر کو، تیری پیاس پہ نہر فرات روتی ہے، نکل کے روتا ہے دن چھپ کے رات روتی ہے، جناب سلمان زینب سے حال شام سنا، جناب سلمہ نے زینب سے حال شام سنا، رسول زاد کی ہر بات بات روتی ہے، رسول زاد کی ہر بات بات روتی ہے۔ اور تو اس طرح سے لٹا اے حسین ابن علی، تو اس طرح سے لٹا اے حسین ابن علی، تیری غریبی پہ پیمبر کی ذات روتی ہے، نکل کے روتا ہے دن، چھپ کے رات روتی ہے، حسین غم میں تیرے کائنات روتی ہے۔ صلوات۔
صلوات زمین کربلا میں دفن ہیں گل پیرہن کتنے، زمین کربلا میں دفن ہیں گل پیرہن کتنے، تڑپ کر مر گئے سینے پہ اس کے خستہ تن کتنے، زمین کربلا میں دفن ہیں گل پیرہن کتنے، کوئی پوچھے تو زینب سے مصائب کس قدر جھیلے، کوئی پوچھے تو زینب سے مصائب کس قدر جھیلے، اٹھائے کربلا سے شام تک رنج و محن کتنے، زمین کربلا میں دفن ہیں گل پیرہن کتنے، رضائے شاہ والا کا ہر ایک اقدام زینب کا، رضائے شاہ والا کا ہر ایک اقدام زینب کا، زمانے میں ہے ایسے باوفا بھائی بہن کتنے، زمین کربلا میں دفن ہیں گل پیرہن کتنے، پسر زینب کے دونوں کا سمو اکبر علی اصغر، پسر زینب کے دونوں کا سمو اکبر علی اصغر، دیے ہیں کربلا کو شاہدین گل بدن کتنے، امین کربلا میں دفن ہیں گل پیرہن کتنے، فدا اسلام پر لاکھوں ہوئے تاریخ
اسلام پر لاکھوں ہوئے تاریخ کہتی ہے، مگر ہیں کربلا والوں کے جیسے بے کفن کتنے زمینیں، کربلا میں دفن ہیں گل پیرہن کتنے، ہوں جس میں قاسم و اکبر سے گل اصغر سے ہوں غنچے، ہوں جس میں قاسم و اکبر سے گل اصغر سے ہوں غنچے، خزاں لوٹے ہیں تو نے سچ بتا ایسے چمن کتنے زمینیں، کربلا میں دفن ہیں گل پیرہن کتنے، تڑپ کر مر گئے سینے پہ اس کے خستہ تن کتنے زمینیں، کربلا میں دفن ہیں گل پیرہن کتنے. صلوات.
محمد وآل محمد صلوات. صلوات بر محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل علی. زندان کھل گیا ہے، سکینہ وطن چلو، سجاد کہہ کے گر پڑا چھوٹی سی قبر پر، زندان کھل گیا ہے، سکینہ وطن چلو، سجاد کہہ کے گر پڑا چھوٹی سی قبر پر، مظلوم ایسے گر پڑا، مظلوم ایسے گر پڑا، تربات پہ بہن کی جیسے حسین تھا گرا، اکبر کی لاش، اکبر کی لاش پر زندان کھل گیا ہے، سکینہ وطن چلو، سجاد کہہ کے گر پڑا چھوٹی سی قبر پر، دیکھو نہیں رہی میرے ہاتھوں میں اب رسن، جانے لگا ہے قافلہ اب لوٹ کر وطن، لیکن تو بہن شام میں، لیکن تو بہن شام میں قیدی ہی رہ گئی، کھا کر تماچے سو گئی زندہ کی خاک پر، زندان کھل گیا ہے، کرتا ہوں یاد رو کے میں منظر وہ درد کا کانوں کے زخم پر جو تماچا تجھے لگا، بابا کو تو سینا پہ، بابا کو تو سینا پہ صدا دیتی رہ گئی، بابا سینا پہ روتے تھے تب تجھ کو دیکھ کر، زندان کھل گیا ہے، سکینہ وطن چلو، سجاد کہہ کے گر پڑا چھوٹی سی قبر پر، اماں کی طرح تجھ کو نہ مل پائی تھی ردا، بابا کی طرح تجھ کو کفن بھی نہ مل سکا، پتھر بھی کھائے شام میں، پتھر بھی کھائے شام میں، تو نے میری طرح ناکے سے گر کے ہو گئی تیری بھی خم کمر، زندان کھل گیا ہے، سکینہ وطن چلو، سجاد کہہ کے گر پڑا چھوٹی سی قبر پر، میں لے کے تجھ کو شام سے واپس نہ جا سکا، بابا کو کیا بتاؤں میں اب جا کے کربلا، کرتے میں دفن کر کے، کرتے میں دفن کر کے بنائی تیری لحد، عابد کو خون رلائے گا یہ درد عمر بھر، زندان کھل گیا ہے، سکینہ وطن چلو، سجاد کہہ کے گر پڑا چھوٹی سی قبر پر، مظلوم ایسے گر پڑا، مظلوم ایسے گر پڑا تربت پہ بہن کی، جیسے حسین تھا گرا اکبر کی لاش پر، محمد وال محمد صلوات۔
Assalamu alaikum. Today's day of Arbaeen. We are commemorating the Arbaeen of Sayyidul Shuhada Imam Hussain alayhi salam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. And all the Shuhada Karbala at this center. Inshallah, Majlis will be recited by our visiting speaker, Dr. Sayyid Shabir Kirmani, just after the announcements. After the Majlis, we'll have the Alam and Mehmal brought right after the Majlis, before the Nohas, and then we'll end the program with the Arbaeen. After the program, we'll have the full Niyaz, inshallah. Just to remind quickly, all our audience here is we have program throughout the year. Shab-e Jummah every Thursday, and Friday Jummah Salat and Fajr Salat on Saturdays at 5 a.m. in the morning. If you can join us, these programs throughout the years, in exception to all the others with other shahadat that we have throughout the year. Request for the for Surah Fatiha for the sponsors of tonight Tabarruk. Marhum Jafar Muhammad Karmali, Marhuma Mahruk Jahan, Marhuma Chand Fatma Zaidi, and Marhum Nafis Haidar Zaidi, Marhumin of Dr. Panju's family. All these Marhumin Kul Mu'minin and Mu'minat, Muslimin and Muslimat, Al-Fatiha. Just to remind those who were not part of that, we did, the Children's Committee here are organizing events during those special days for small kids age 2 to 8. This way they are aware of any event, like for example Ashura, or even we did for Hajj, and now also for Arbaeen. This way they are aware from the early childhood these events. So we'll play a video for that event that we did at this center. Thanks to the Children Committee organizers and all those who participated in this event. We'll just play a short video, and then I'll ask Muhammad Bhai Mauludin to come and thank our visiting speaker. So I request the AV to play the video and also put that television on beside the member so that people can see here.
Sallallahu ala sakin karb o bala tashne jam bala ya Husayn ya Husayn ya Husayn ya Husayn Husayn sarallah aba abdallah Husayn sarallah aba abdallah Husayn sarallah aba abdallah Husayn sarallah aba abdallah Jan agha Jan agha قربان آقا سید لچان آقا جان آقا سن قربان آقا سید لچان آقا جان آقا جان الحمد لله الذي رزقنا بزيارته مولاي الحسين حسين شهيد حسين قريب حسين Hussein Abdullah, we are the promise that Allah made to Rasulullah. We are the promise that Allah made to Rasulullah. Abu Abdullah حسين مولا يا 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 سيد الشباب يا أهل الجنة يا حسين يا حسين يا حسين Hussein is the salvation and the master حسينا وحسينا وحسينا Hussein is the salvation and the master حسينا وحسينا وحسينا حسين الغريب الغريب الحسين حسين الشهيد الشهيد الحسين حسين الغريب الغريب الحسين حسين الشهيد الشهيد الحسين This is an invite to all. Join us as we now recall some of the hardships and pain suffered by our Hussein. पत्थर हटा के लाश से ज़ैनब दी सदा क्या तुम मेरे हुसैन हो कैसे पड़े हैं जिस्म के टुकड़े जुदा जुदा क्या तुम मेरे हुसैन हो सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम على الحسين عشقوں میں مثل بارون صلى الله على المظلوم بكربلاء ازدادت شدم بالخون حسين مولانا 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 أبد والله يا زهرة ما ننسى حسينا أبد والله يا زهرة ما ننسى حسينا أبد والله يا زهرة ما ننسى حسينا
Ali Muhammad. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless the children committee and all those who participated. You have seen this wonderful initiative. These programs have been going on for those people who have not seen. For kids, as I mentioned, for Hajj, they did for Ashura. If you see, there was a clip for Ashura Day also that we did our Rasul Alim, and also this to bring awareness like what Arbaeen walk is, what it's all about, inshallah. So can I have a loud salawat for Children's Committee and all those participated and contributed? Allahumma salli ala Muhammad ali Muhammad. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us also tawfiq to go for the Arbaeen. Now I'd like to request Muhammad Maulina come and address and thank our visiting speaker. For Muhammad wa ali Muhammad salawat.
Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Respected scholar Sayyid Shabir Kirmani, my respected elders, brothers and sisters, my youngsters, Assalamu alaikum. I just, first of all, I want to thank Sayyid Kirmani for taking the time out. I know he's got a young family and to travel is not an easy thing, but alhamdulillah, he made a trip here and we really appreciate you coming up here. And this is the first time he's come to Razavi Center. And I don't think this will be the last time, so just keep that in mind. But thank you once again. Also, I'd like to thank all the sponsors, donors, sponsors of the Niyaz, the Tabarruk, the donors, monetarily donations they made, all the reciters, and also want to thank all our volunteers. As you know, volunteers are a backbone of our community. And without them, nothing happens. They're the first ones here, serving, cleaning, and they're the last ones out. So thank you on both sides, my sisters and the men's side, all the volunteers. Thank you, really appreciate it. Can we have a loud salawat for our volunteers? Allahumma salli ala. These volunteers work very hard. A lot of times we don't see because we've left the center when the program is done. So thank you once again, all the volunteers and my committee members as well, who work really hard to put these programs on. My only thing is that if we have programs here, we usually like to start on time. So I'm humbly requesting people to please get here on time so we can start our programs on time. Quite often we have to wait for a crowd to come in before a lecturer goes up, and it's not a good thing when a lecturer has to recite against like maybe 4 or 5 people in the audience. So if you guys can make it on time, I'd really appreciate it. I know that we have jobs to go to through the week, but even on weekends, please try and make it on time. That's a humble request to you all. So if you can make it on time here. Today's niyaz was, Said Amir Bhai already announced who the donors were, but I just want to thank the people who actually cooked the niyaz today. The Desai family, the Balwa family, and the Palsani family. These guys are always willing to come out and volunteer their services to cook in the kitchen. So once again, thank you to those guys as well. And thank you for all the participants who have been coming every night and joining us for the lectures. So with that said, I'd like everybody to move up a little bit, and if you can put your cell phones on mute and or turn them off or silent, whatever you can do, so the phones don't go off while the lecture's on. So with your loud salawat, I'll ask the Sayyid Shabir Kirmani to please come up for his lecture.
Fatiha. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. فوض أمري إلى الله إن الله بصير بالعباد ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. حسبنا الله ونعم الوكيل ونعم المولى ونعم النصير. والصلاة والسلام والتحية والإكرام على الرسول المسدد المصطفى الأمجد المحمود الأحمد الذي سمي في السماء بأحمد وفي الأرض بأبي القاسم محمد. اللهم صل. وعلى أهل بيت الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين المنتجبين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا. وقل رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. أما بعد، قال الله تبارك وتعالى في كتاب الكريم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أم حسبت أن أصحاب الكهف والرقيم كانوا من آياتنا عجبا. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. My respected elders, brothers and sisters in Islam and Iman, Assalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Question: what is freedom? Today marks the Arbaeen or the Chahlum of Sayyid al-Shuhada. It's a moment for us to reflect. It's a moment for us to announce that we have not forgotten the movement of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. That is that movement, that tragedy that began on the plains of Karbala, and it was in the 61st year of Hijrah. We have not forgotten it. So we mark that that tragedy was there. And in this 40-day mark, we say that we've not forgotten the movement. And we also say that we have not forgotten the message of Hussein alayhi salam. That is, his message lives on. And at the same time we commemorate this sorrow, this is also a moment in some sense metaphorically to commemorate the victory of Hussein alayhi salam. That is, although on the plains of Karbala he was butchered, but he had a sister and he had a son who carried on that message. And they showed the world what humanity is. Even in the heat of battle, humanity is shown. And they showed that victory truly comes from the spirit of struggle, from the spirit of truth. And so in some sense, it's a day of tragedy. It's a bittersweet day, but at the same time, it's a day to remember the victory of Hussein. As the poet says, आंखों में जागता है सदा गम हुसैन का, आंखों में जागता है सदा गम हुसैन का, सीने में सांस लेता है मातम हुसैन का, सीने में सांस लेता है मातम हुसैन का, और मिट्टी में मिल गए हैं इरादे यजीद के, लहरा रहा है आज भी परचम हुसैन का. मिट्टी में मिल गए हैं इरादे यजीद के, लहरा रहा है आज भी परचम हुसैन का. That whatever Yazid wanted went to the dust, but till this day you see the flag of Hussein ibn Ali flying high. And that is the power of ishq, the power of passion, the power of the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that Imam Hussein alayhi salam and his movement teaches us. And what's beautiful about this message of Hussein ibn Ali is that the message is a message of universality. The message is a message of humanity. The message is a message of truth. And in that understanding, when we commemorate Chehlum today and the Arbaeen of Sayyidul Shuhada today, we remind ourselves, what path are we on? Are we on the path of truth or are we on the path of falsehood? What path are we choosing? Ourselves and for our broader society. So it's something to reflect on, the tragedy as well as the victory of Sayyidul Shuhada. But of course, that victory is of course not complete without the movement of the people after Karbala, Imam Sajjad, Bibi Zainab, salamullahi alayha, and the women and children. And you find that one of the most beautiful aspects of Islam within the school of the Ahlul Bayt is when it came to role models, when it came to people who give us the inspiration to act in the way of God. You have the likes of the personalities such as Rasulullah, such as Muhammad Arabi, such as Ali al-Murtada, such as Hussein Shaheed bi Karbala. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created a system that where there are these individuals in parallel. Allah gave us Muhammad and Ali and Hussein, but in parallel He gave us Khadija and Fatima and Zainab. And the world had not seen this caliber of leadership. The old model before Islam, before Rasulullah made his announcement, was some would bury their daughters alive. Some would say that a woman does not have the audacity to speak. But this model, whether it was Bibi Fatima speaking in the face of the ruler of the time, or for example, or Bibi Zainab speaking to the zalim in front of her eyes, they had not seen this model, that they had kept this notion of what a woman is confined. But when we come to the movement, one of the elements of Karbala is that it shows how victory is achieved even while one is oppressed. You know, Ghadir had hundreds of thousands of people, but yet many people forgot it. It was systematically made in a way that people would try to forget it. They tried to fabricate things. This happened in the history of Islam, in the history of the world. But our ulama say that perhaps Karbala may have also been forgotten had Karbala not had Zainab. Zainab salamullahi alayha preserved that message for all of time. As the poet says, "E Karbala ke qasr ki memar as-salam, ghurbat mein shahzadi mukhtar as-salam, e ghaza rukhe shah abrar as-salam, jo rang chad chuka tha उतरने नहीं दिया, जो रंग चढ़ चुका था उतरने नहीं दिया, और तूने किसी शहीद को मरने नहीं दिया. जो रंग चढ़ चुका था उतरने नहीं दिया, तूने किसी शहीद को मरने नहीं दिया. The mission of Sayyidul Shuhada lived on through Zainab Ulya Maqam. That is her struggle, her sacrifice, and her preservation of the message. Today is a day of tragedy. Today is a day of mourning, and I won't take much of your time, inshallah. But it's also a day to make sure that, as I mentioned, that Dr. Ali Shariati had mentioned that Imam Hussein left this world in a state of thirst. But perhaps his maqsad, his purpose, is still thirsty today. That is to say that there was one physical thirst. There was a thirst of meaning, a thirst of purpose. And that thirst is something that we need to reflect on. So in these days and these ayyam of Arbaeen, sometimes you get people who come from far distances. And in that environment, it's important to get a message across so that the movement of Sayyidul Shuhada is not kept in a state of thirst. And so with that, I want to mention just a couple of concepts in front of you about the concept of what is the freedom, what is the future of our community, and also how does Hussein teach us how to live in this world. What form of Islam will exist if we want this to be a vibrant community 5, 10, 15 years, 100 years down the line. And finally, what is it about Jahlum that brings the hearts here? What is the dynamics between aql and ishq? And how is it so important to understand this? To understand what Islam we need to share with the next generation so that they are not just as Muslim or mu'min as us. They are better mu'mineen than us. They are better Muslims than us. And it progressively gets stronger over time. This is what I want to cover with you, inshallah. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran at the first level says, look, Allah tells us stories of nations. Allah tells us stories of prophets. Allah tells us about Ad and Thamud and many others that came. And Allah is not trying to entertain us. Allah is trying to tell us how do we draw lessons from these people who came before. Number one. Number two, when I mentioned to you the other night when Imam Ali, for example, letter 31 of Nahjul Balagha, he says to his son, study the pages of history. Imam Ali is saying, study history. He's saying, why? He says, I studied, Imam Ali alayhi salam saying, I studied history up until it was as if I was walking amongst the relics of past civilizations. And I saw what brought them good and what brought them harm. So Imam Ali is telling you and I this. But if you look at the world, you'll find that many times, whether it was Huxley or Gibbon or many other historians, they said the biggest lesson of history is what? When you read people, historians, Toynbee, Gibbon, you go down the line, they said when you read history, the biggest lesson of history is that man does not learn from history. That is, it's all in front of you. All of what happens there. And when you want to understand, why we understand from all the pages of history, is that insan doesn't understand from history. They don't learn from history. So those same mistakes or some issues that happened before, they are bound to repeat themselves. History, if it doesn't repeat, at least it rhymes. So those similar patterns you notice. So in that light, I want to share a potential problem and a potential solution with you. And we have to go on a quick journey. The first journey is this, number one. What is the history of migration in this part of the world? I will give you the example of where I'm coming from in the United States, but you may find parallels here in Canada. And so the dynamics are the following. Number one, the book that I encourage you to read is called Religion and Immigration. It's written by Dr. John Esposito. He's the editor. He's a professor emeritus at Georgetown University. And he, along with other writers, wrote this book and compiled this book called The History. It covers the history of people coming of different faiths to America and what happened to them. Number one. In this book, you'll find a chapter on the history of certain communities' migration. And in that, you will find that the year 1654, almost 300 to 400 years ago, and in that time, the heads, the management, the leadership of the Dutch West India Company, they wrote a letter. You know, the Dutch East India Company, Dutch West India Company. So these two, this management team wrote a letter to a man by the name of Peter Stuyvesant. Peter Stuyvesant was the governor of a region called New Amsterdam. At that time it was called New Amsterdam. And so they wrote a letter. They said, we want to relocate approximately 24 members of our community from Brazil to your territory of New Amsterdam, which we now call New York. So Peter Stuyvesant wrote back a response. He said, I'm sorry, I can't accept these people. Why? Because if they're sick, if they need money, if they need help, who's going to take care of them? So the leadership of the Dutch West India Company wrote back a one-line reply. They said, you have nothing to worry about. They will be taken care of by their own. These were members of the Jewish community. So what happened? 1654. 100 years later, 1754. In this era in time, when historians and sociologists documented, they said of that generation, the first wave of Jewish immigration in America was this time. 100 years later, historians, they said that we did not find a single person who identified as Jewish in the entire northeast block of America. They were gone. Intermarried, other things happened. Now, this is the first wave of Jewish migration into America. The second wave of Jewish migration to America came 200 years before the first, 1850. And those people had learned the lessons that their predecessors had faced. So they said, look, we're not going to make the same mistakes that our predecessors made. We are going to bring all of our all of our rabbis, all of our poets, all of our thinkers, all of our writers, all of our poets, we're going to bring them from all over the world, in particular Eastern Europe, but also other parts. They said, we're going to bring the whole culture with us to America. And they did. And when they did, the second wave of immigrants, despite all of their efforts, despite all of their hard work, and despite all of their bringing the capital, human capital and otherwise capital with them, historians said the second generation of Jewish immigrants who came to America in 1850, their first generation were Orthodox. You know Orthodox? They were like original, like Orthodox. The second generation after them were conservative. Orthodox to conservative. So they were a little bit different, a little diluted, maybe one may say, but not the same, but still practicing. The third generation, they said they were called Reform Jews. And the fourth generation, their words, not mine, were de-Judaized. They were no longer Jewish. You can check the data on this. Up until the year 2000, the Jewish community in America, they used to do something called the NJPS, National Jewish Population Survey. And they used to ask things like, how are you Jewish? Are you culturally, religious, or both? And the data was so clear over the years that they said, we don't need to do this anymore. People were getting less and less religiously Jewish and much more culturally Jewish. In fact, another thing that I want to share with you is, in that book it says, you can check it yourself, that the second generation of the second wave of Jewish immigrants who came to America, so we're talking about the turn of the 19th to 20th century, right? 1900s. The second generation were very affluent and wealthy. Why? Because the first generation comes, they are building up their life. The second generation learns, and then they become very, like they build up the businesses that their parents started. They established themselves. They did very well financially. And when they became very wealthy financially, 100 years ago in America, they then started building palatial synagogues, palace-like synagogues, you know, like synagogues where they go to worship. And when they began to build these, they would bring the doors from other parts of the world and the greatest architecture and the greatest everything. They would bring the best of the best of the best. And I've seen some of these synagogues in New York or in Los Angeles and in Beverly Hills. Some of them look like it's a garden in heaven, the way that they've been made. But after the second generation, they built these synagogues and they had a saying. And that saying is what I wanted to share with you, which is what? The saying was, after they spent so much money, so much time, so much effort, so much everything to build these huge synagogues of multi-million dollars, they would say, the elders who built these, they said, as this generation is turning from the second to the third generation, they said, these synagogues are heavy on sweat and light on tears. What? Heavy on sweat, light on tears? Meaning we've put so much time, so much effort, so much money, but there's no one here. There's no one here on the Sabbath. And if people are here, there's no, that spirituality is not there. That commemoration is not there. Heavy on sweat, light on tears. And I tell you with my hand on my heart, from the coast of, I've been to Vancouver, to Toronto, to California, to New York, the Muslim community today is doing the exact same thing. And the reality of the matter is, in building this, we're not learning from the history. By the way, building it's not a problem. The problem we need to understand is economic and physical infrastructure. Building these things are very important and they are beautiful and they are something we should do. But it is necessary, not sufficient. Just physically having the building doesn't mean that anyone will be here. Along with physical infrastructure, we need to make sure we have spiritual infrastructure in the heart and the mind. And unless and until we don't develop that, you can see the writing on the wall of what's to happen. So, but I don't want to leave you without hope. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we are told, according to our traditions, the major sin in the court of Allah, number one, is the concept of shirk. Do you know what the second biggest is? To lose hope in the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allahu Akbar. La taqnatu min rahmatillah. Inna Allah yaghfiru dhunuba jami'a. How merciful is Allah that He says that to think that I won't have mercy on you is a sin in of itself. So now, this is the writing on the wall in front of your eyes. But what's the solution? This is the second story that I'm taking with you on this journey. Come with me. The year is 2007, January. In a private ceremony, a man by the name of Keith Ellison, the first Muslim congressman in the United States, he swears in from Minnesota. And when he swears in, he says that I want to swear in America, I want to swear in not on the Bible, but I want to swear in on the Quran. And what's beautiful about America in this sense is that they said, we will accommodate you. And they accommodated him. But in what way? They went to the Library of Congress, the largest library in the world, and they went and they got a copy of the Quran from there. That copy of the Quran had listed on it or inscribed on the side of it, written the letters TJ. He at this junction, Keith Ellison swears in on this Quran. But that left a question to some people. What was this Quran that was brought from the Library of Congress, and why did it say T and J, and why was it over 200 years old? And this led a professor at the University of Texas, Austin, by the name of Denise Spellberg, Dr. Denise Spellberg, to research this, and she wrote an entire book, which I recommend you read. It's called The Quran and the Founding Fathers. Thomas Jefferson's Quran. The name of the book is Thomas Jefferson's Quran. Thomas Jefferson, if you know, is the guy who was the main author of the Constitution of the United States, along with others. So she wrote this book called Thomas Jefferson. That TJ standard for Thomas Jefferson. But the question was, why did Thomas Jefferson over 200 years ago have a Quran? Why? He was also the third president of the United States. And the reality is, he did not have just one Quran, he had two Qurans. He had one Quran as a law student. Afterwards, his library was burnt. He bought another Quran. This is the first picture. Second picture. If you go to the Library of Congress today in America, you go there and you do a tour, and they will show you the artwork on the roof. And on the artwork on the roof, one of the artworks on the roof will show you, it will say art, it will have art and it will have certain names. For example, it will say ancient Rome, ancient Greece. It will say, for example, Christianity, other things. And when you get that tour, they'll tell you, these are the things that gave ideological rise to America. These are the things that inspired and influenced the ideology of the building of America. And till this day, you'll find up there written Islam. What? Why does it say Islam there? Third picture. You go to the Supreme Court of the United States of America, the largest court in the land, and you'll see artwork that's on the walls there. Amongst the artwork there, you'll find there inscribed in stone some of the great lawgivers of the world. You'll find, for example, Hammurabi and Hammurabi's code from Babylonia and ancient Mesopotamia. You'll find the likes of Moses and the Ten Commandments. Till this day, etched in stone in the Supreme Court of the United States, you will find a man by the name of Muhammad Arabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Why is Rasulullah in the Supreme Court of the United States of America? I thought this was a religion against Islam or at odds or these things. And the reality of the matter is, you may find more Islamic principles in this part of the world than other parts of the world. And the reality of the matter is, the amal and implementation perhaps was done better here. Yes, other parts of the world may have their own pros and cons. And don't get me wrong, I don't want to say everything's kosher. I'm just saying that the roots and the foundation of this go deep, and Islam was at the essence and the arrival of America. And many of the principles that Islam cherishes were actually inspired and influenced and also gave rise to the principles of America. But sometimes we have to wake up a nation who's gone asleep and say, look, go back to the roots. Let's go back to the element of freedom. Let's go back to the element of liberty. So the elements may not be there today, but it's still there in the roots. Does anyone know what the first country to recognize America was? Morocco. And this was a Muslim nation at the time, kingdom. And so this is something too important for that many, even Americans and maybe Canadians don't know. I'm telling you this because we need to understand these dynamics. So the challenge is there, but the opportunity is also there. Second element of what I wanted to share with you. Third element of how do you connect all of these things to understand how Islam gives us life in this world. One of the big challenges that we're facing across the globe, whether it's here or America or the United Kingdom or otherwise, is that many people are living dual lives. There's one life of the Imam Bargah and there's another life outside the Imam Bargah. There's the masjid life and the non-masjid life. And they don't ever meet. They're two different worlds. So our world and our life has become compartmentalized. So on Jum'ah, for example, or Thursday night, when I'm here, I'm here. When I'm there, I'm there. And every major faith community is facing this. Islam did not want this. Islam wanted that you have one life. But what ends up happening is sometimes we are going towards goals that we perceive to be worldly. And we think those are at odds with Islam. When in reality, we should aspire to excellence in Islam. We should aspire to becoming the best version of ourselves in Islam. We should aspire to work hard. So when you have a niyyah and an intention to become a doctor, lawyer, engineer, or whatever, or journalist, economist, go down the line, alhamdulillah, it's very good. Just make sure you say qurbatan ilallah, to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Just say to better humanity, to help society, to make the world a better place. Number one. Number two is understand how to live the spirit of Islam through this. And this brings me to the point of aql and ishq. Aql and ishq. In our world, we sometimes need to recognize this intricate balance. In this journey, Toynbee, the historian, said, I've not found any religion that emphasized more than Islam the acquisition of knowledge, the accumulation of knowledge, the getting of knowledge. So knowledge is very important. But what is knowledge? And what are the dimensions? Come with me on a journey. What's aql? What is ishq? You know, if you go to the Arab community, our friends, our brothers, you'll find that sometimes in their attire, in their traditional attire, they'll wear, for example, the men, dishdasha, kandura, for example, and then sometimes they'll wear some head things on their head. For example, they'll wear sometimes a scarf, or they'll wear something of that nature. And on top of that, sometimes they have something that they keep it down with. Does anyone know what that's called? What's another statement? As in, I'm talking about the band that goes around. Huh? Iqal. Ahsan. That's the word I was looking for. Iqal. Does anyone know what the root word of iqal is and where the iqal comes from? Aqal. Interesting. Why? So in that time, do you know what there was a purpose of that iqal? Do you know what the purpose was? The purpose was the following. Today is a different world. At that time, if you're a Bedouin Arab in the middle of the desert, what happens is you have your camel. The camel, and you need to stop sometimes to take a break. But you don't have brakes like the cars today. The camel is your vehicle to transport yourself, your luggage, and all of these things. So how did you used to break this camel and stop it from running away? One of the things that they used to do was they used to bend one of the legs of the camel, and they would put this thing around the leg. So if it ran away, you could catch it. This is the same root word of aql. Aql, which we call reason, is that which holds you back, which restrains you, which is important. But if I constantly live in restraining myself, then if I'm constantly living in fear, because aql is very important to protect you, then when do I begin to live? What will I do? I won't step out of my house. I won't step out and do anything in life. So aql is very important. But understand, it may have limitations. Aql needs to be exhausted to its limit. But it has limitations. So stay with me here and don't accept this yet. Second example, Buridan's donkey or Buridan's mule. Buridan was a French philosopher 600 years ago. He wrote this, but before him, others had also written it. Razavi had given this example, and others had also, Aristotle had given an example. Imagine for a moment there is a mule, and this mule is equally hungry and equally thirsty. And this mule that's equally hungry and equally thirsty, it's equal distant from water and equal distance from food. Ghazali said, just imagine that it's just hungry. And it's equally distant from two dates, two khujurs, two dates. And the third element is it's purely rational. The assumption it's purely rational, purely logical, purely reasonable. So again, if you're with me, what is Buridan's mule saying? Imagine there is a mule, it's equidistant from food, equidistant from water, equally hungry, equally thirsty. Third element, purely rational. What will it do? Purely rational. What will it do? What will it go to first? For computer science folks, they should be able to get this. If you replace a mule with a computer, you can do that as well. And you'll find if it's purely rational, if you take Ghazali's example, it's the same, that two dates are there, right? You may be thinking because water is superior, then it's necessary for survival. So then take Ghazali's example of the dates. You have two, it's hungry, equal distance dates, equal distance and equal hunger. What's going to happen? In a purely rational world is the mule will, the computer will throw a glitch, the mule will die. The mule will die because it cannot decipher between which decision to make. They're exactly equal. You know how you can save the life of the mule? You just bump it, move it one way or the other. An act of randomness. I didn't give you this for no reason. Allow me to explain. There's a moment in time, Ibrahim destroys the idols, which I mentioned the other day. Ibrahim and the movement of Hussein are aligned. Ibrahim decides to destroy the idols to wake up the people. When he destroys the idols to wake up the people, what happens? They say, who did it? He says, ask the big one. When he says, ask the big one, they say, you know that's not possible. Eventually, he could have lied his way out of it if he wanted, right? But he didn't. So they built a huge fire. They threw him towards the fire. And when they threw him towards the fire, eventually Jibreel comes and Jibreel says, what are you going to do? He says, do you need help? He said, yes, but not from you, from the Lord of the heavens and the earth. And then the poet says the line. बेखतर कूद पड़ा आतिश नमरूद में इश्क अक्ल है महवे तमाशा लबे बाम अभी. I'll break it down. बेखतर, fearlessly, ishq, the divine love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, jumped head first, fearlessly into the fire of Namrud. Aql hai mehve tamasha labe baam abhi. Baam, you know, have you heard that? No, baam udar saj gaye, jeete ji mar gayi. That same baam. Baam is like a terrace or a height. The poet is saying, the love of Allah jumped head first into the fire of Namrud. Aql hai mehve tamasha labe baam abhi. Aql, reason, is looking from the top of the terrace and watching the spectacle, not doing anything. Stuck. Just watching. Should I stay? Should I go? What should I do? What should I not do? What brought you here today? Aql? Ishq. Love. There's something about the movement of Sayyid al-Shuhada that does not allow us to stay at home. You can use reason. You can use logic. And reason is very important. Please don't get me wrong. Reason needs to be used to its maximum capacity. But as the poet says, Aql charaghe raah hai manzil nahi. It is the lantern which guides, but it's not the end destination. Because pure aql also led to Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Where where people are killed and are affected till this day. Karbala is a balance between aql and ishq. I often tell people, you want to know Karbala? You want to know who's right, who's wrong, who's on principle, who's not? You don't need heavy philosophy. Simple. 2 fathers, 2 sons. 2 events. Siffin, Karbala. Siffin, one father is Muawiyah. The other father is Ali. Muawiyah has control of the water. He cuts off water to Ali. Ali gets control of the water. He says, give water to all of them. Karbala, Hussein and Yazid. Hussein has water. He says, give them water, give their animals water. Yazid cuts off water to children. You don't need to tell me any heavy philosophy. Just tell me who gave basic human rights, who was the one who gave water, and who took away water. I'll tell you who's on haqq, who's on batil. I'll tell you who's on truth and who's on falsehood. Karbala is a mission of humanity. Karbala is a movement of humanity. That in the heat of battle, where aql would tell you, don't give the enemy water. Ishq tells you, no, my humanity does not allow me to do this. This is the movement of Sayyid al-Shuhada. This is the movement of Aba Abdullah. So now, what are the different manifestations of ishq? The poet continues, Iqbal. Sidqe Khalil biya ishq. Sabre Hussain biya ishq. Allahu Akbar. Ibrahim could have lied. He didn't. The honesty of Ibrahim is also ishq. The sabr of Hussein is also ishq. Sidqe Khalil biya ishq. Sabre Hussain biya ishq. Marika wujud mein Badro Hunain biya ishq. Badr and Hunain, there was a physical battle there. That's also a manifestation of ishq. He continues and he says, sometimes Mawla Ali Khaybar Shikan is ishq in the battlefield. And sometimes restraint and holding yourself back, that's also ishq. So when you live in the world and you plan to be a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer, an entrepreneur, live Karbala, live the Quran by understanding the motivation that inspires in you. We say, Ya Aba Abdullah, Ya laytani kuntu ma'akum fafuza fawzan azima. If I was with you, I would have achieved a huge victory. I wish I was with you. Okay, fantastic. But are you willing to take a risk for Karbala? Do you know what Islam encourages us to do economically, financially, career-wise, work-wise? Does anyone know if Islam has ever given guidance on what your career should be? Any ideas? You know, it was amazing. I grew up never hearing this from the minbar, but when I read, it was a very rich thing that the Islam talked about. Anyways, another discussion for another day. One of the most highly recommended things in Islam is to do business, tijara, with ethics and principle, of course. To do tijara. Many people will say, do I want to do business? They say, it's too risky. You're saying, I'm going to give my life for you, Abu Abdullah, but you're not willing to make the imam or of the time, for example, a partner in your business, or say that I'm going to give money for Allah's sake and take a risk in business and go towards that path. Be honest with yourself at every junction. I'm not saying it's easy, but it's worth it. And then, by the way, business is not for everyone. I'm giving one example. For you, it may be Allah's given you a gift to be able to write, to be able to speak, to be able to do something which others aren't. But there's a fear that keeps you back. Remember that it's the ishq of Allah, the divine love, the passion for the Ahlul Bayt that should motivate you and inspire you to go forward. And that extends to not only this domain of business, the domain of sports. If it's basketball or hockey or whatever sport, use that as a motivator. And understand how it can channel that passion within you to go higher. You know, I was in London and people, you know, when it came to bigotry, every country has these dynamics, the United States, Canada, and others. But some of the people who, when they had some bigotry or they had some sentiments toward Muslim, when they found an athlete who was a hero, for example, Liverpool, when they had Mo Salah, you know Mo Salah? Mo Salah. Eventually, the same people who may have been bigots, some of them before, they said, Mo Salah, gift from Allah. Right? It changes the dynamics. It changes your understanding of this is what I understand. Because we all aspire to excellence. You know, I mentioned the other night the Pakistani javelin thrower, right? His inspiration, whether he says it out loud, whether he says it in heart, he's saying, Ya Ali, for example, right? That inspiration, channel it. When you go into the school to give the exam, say that in your heart, in your mind, in your spirit. Say the verse of the Quran. Say the things that Allah says to the mu'min. La takhaf, don't fear. For the believers, no, have no fear. Nasrun min Allah wa fathun qareeb. Say these things to inspire you and have you in your heart. Ali is the model and the symbol of chivalry. Hussein is the model of chivalry. And it should inspire us to be excellent. Imam Ali was a statesman, a politician, a leader, a warrior, an intellectual, a judge. You can go down the line, which I mentioned the other day, the French writer and historian. The dimensionalities are infinite. Hussein ibn Ali, leader of the highest caliber. You find this, use that and channel that in your life so you don't have two lives, masjid life and non-masjid life. When I'm going to the examination hall, that should be part of my deen and iman to do excellence. You don't think Allah will reward you for finding a cure to cancer? You don't think Allah will reward you for coming up with innovations in the area of medicine and technology that betters society, that betters humanity, that helps people? Islam, what is this Islam that we've forgotten? This is where we've lost the spirit. There was an Islam that was contributing to the world to such a capacity. But where is that Islam? That Islam is not there because we created this dichotomy of deen and dunya. So channel that when you're in a difficult moment or a difficult time, channel through the zikr of Allah. Of course, there's no doubt that Allah is the ultimate goal. But Allah also sent the Quran as an intermediary. Allah sent the Prophet to convey the Quran. Allah used intermediaries because Allah knows how we work. And Allah knows that we are inspired by personalities. We are inspired by individuals. And when we're not given role models, we'll find our own. And that's why Imam Ali, that's why Rasulullah, that's why the Ahlul Bayt show us, and Imam Hussein's movement shows us how to live and how to live superior. So the theme of Islam is excellence. Excellence in every domain. Sometimes excellence is giving up everything you have. Sometimes excellence is achieving. Sometimes excellence is in different forms. But these centers, these masajid, these imam bargas need to be centers of excellence. That every generation says, I come here. That they don't see today Masjid Imam Barga Husainiya is seen as a zero-sum game. You know, in game theory, they talk about zero-sum. One person wins, one person loses. And the game is between masjid and life. And believe me, masjid is losing. Life is winning. Why? Because people see, when I come to masjid, it takes away from my other life. Whereas we need to inculcate a culture where people say, if I don't come to the masjid, the Imam Barga, the Husainiya, I suffer in other parts of my life. I have to come. This is when people will say that I can't live without this. And that was the spirit of Islam. That was the essence of Islam. And that's why these Ahlul Bayt revive us in this. They remind us of this understanding of how to be courageous in the world, how to be in the maidan of life, how to be in the battlefield of life. You know, mihrab, where salah is led, it's called the mihrab. Mihrab is where it comes from harb. Harb means battle, battleground. What battleground is taking place in namaz and salah? There's an internal battle, an intellectual battle, discipline, strength, leadership. All of this I'm leaving. But remember, in your darkest moment, keep Ali alive in your heart. Keep Hussein alayhi salam alive. Hussein, that beating heart gives us an understanding of the depth of this reality. Ali gives you strength even despite fear between aql and ishq. Kabhi Adam, kabhi Musa ne pukara tujhko. I'm drawing to a conclusion. कभी आदम कभी मूसा ने पुकारा तुझको, खिज़र ने और ज़करिया ने पुकारा तुझको, कभी यूशा कभी ईसा ने पुकारा तुझको, खुद नबियों के भी आका ने पुकारा तुझको। और सर पर आफत हो तो तस्बीह जली पढ़ते हैं, सर पर आफत हो तो तस्बीह जली पढ़ते हैं। हम तो क्या सारे नबी नादे आली पढ़ते हैं। सर पर आफत हो तो तस्बीह जली पढ़ते हैं। हम तो क्या सारे नबी नादे अली पढ़ते हैं। There's a request to please move forward, inshallah. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Please move forward. Ali, Ali. रूह अज़ां है बाप तो बेटा नमाज दी, मस्जिद अली की है तो मुसल्ला हुसैन का। मस्जिद अली की है तो मुसल्ला हुसैन का। और जागीर किब्रिया हुई तकसीम इस तरह, जागीर किब्रिया हुई तकसीम इस तरह, काबा अली का अर्श मुअल्ला हुसैन का। जागीर किब्रिया, the alignment of the movement of Ali and Hussein is one and the same. That Allah at times through the traditions of the Prophet, he said Ali is wajhullah, aynullah. This concept. Why? Of course everyone knows Allah is above that. But Allah has agents, and the people who come, Allah makes sure that these individuals are inspirations for the world. Allah gave us these inspirations for a particular reason, because any other example you'll find, they disappointed in areas of life. And one thing that you'll find in the nature of Rasulullah, Imam Ali and Imam Hussein, at no junction did they ever disappoint. There was never anything that was lacking in terms of their leadership. You cannot come to a point and say that there was anything that they compromised principle on. This is why we follow these personalities, and this is why we commemorate them. Because from beginning to end, they embody the message of the Quran. As the poet himself says. By the way, Iqbal, he never openly said he was Shia. And he says that in his own poetry. Allah Allah, by Bismillah, Pidar. Mani Zibhe Azim, Ahmad Pisar. He says the father is the meaning of the Ba of Bismillah, the encapsulation of the essence of the Quran. And his son is the meaning of the spirit of the Zibhe Azim of Ibrahim. That is, وَتَرَكْنَاهُمْ فِي الْآخِرِينَ. Understand this and understand how Karbala can inspire you to live in every aspect of it. When you have fear, use Karbala to conquer. When you have fear, use the name of the Ahlul Bayt. Because, of course, understanding that the guidance is from Allah. But amalan implementation, remember Khaybar, remember Khandaq, remember the battle of Karbala. That movement tells you how to be strong. I'm leaving everything. But aql and ishq, don't forget how important ishq is. And this is why it solves many of the problems when we see issues or things that we see that don't make sense to us about aza. We are using the wrong lens sometimes. we are sometimes looking at the domain of ishq with the lens of aql, and it won't make sense. When I need to look at something microscopic, do I use a telescope or a microscope? When I look at something in the heavens, do I use a telescope or a microscope? And the same way, when I see someone who commemorates Aza and it doesn't make sense to me, well, it doesn't make sense to you because you are applying the lens of aql in the domain of ishq. Go to the mall. Have you ever been to the mall? Do they sell you on aql or ishq? Do they tell you what's your ROI on this? Do they tell you you're going to make this a good investment to make? Aql and ishq. Go to your spouse, your wife, your significant other, and she asks for a bracelet. You said it's too expensive. Tell me what happened. If you find a solution on that, let me know. What I'm saying is, aql and ishq. What does our world govern? Why do you get that really nice car? Aql or ishq? A depreciating asset. If it's an asset, in fact, liability. Your whole world runs on ishq. Your whole world runs on ishq. And you're talking about aql in this domain. What I'm saying is, aql is vital. Don't get me wrong. But live in the real world for a moment. Our whole world is revolving around ishq. So when you come to this, I'm not telling you that you need to follow in that path of what other people are doing. And neither should people who are doing something impose that on someone else. That's not part of religion. I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is, you may have to need your own customs, and that's fine. But when we start saying that, I don't understand this, you don't understand, that's fine. But you have to understand the domains between aql and ishq. Everything should be in the boundary of sharia, no doubt. But at the same time, it's important to understand that power. And some of the times we see the tazi and these things and we don't understand them, but you have to understand the sentiment behind them. And poets have answered this and thinkers have answered this. Dasht ko lahu dekar kya se kya bana dala, kaise kaise zarron ko आईना बना डाला और रोशनी को असगर का नाम दे दिया रब ने इंतहाए जुल्मत को हुरमला बना डाला इंतहाए जुल्मत को हुरमला बना डाला और रोज रोजाए शह पर कैसे हाजिरी होगी रोज रोजाए शह पर कैसे हाजिरी होगी हसरत जियारत ने ताजिया बना डाला. This notion, today you and I jump on a flight to go to Karbala, to Najaf. People used to live their whole life dreaming to go to Karbala. It used to be a 6-month journey. But you want that, you long for that love of the Ahlul Bayt. What do? That's where Taziyah came from. That was the spirit of it, behind it. Yes, over time, maybe people forget the spirit. We need to revive that spirit. But understand that these are these dichotomies that exist. And this happens in our world. If you go to communal societies versus individual-based societies, you need to understand this. So what I'm saying is, we also need to give a space for a new generation that's coming, for them to also establish their elements of aza, and they may be different. There's a lot to say. I'm leaving everything. Channel Karbala in your life to live one life. Today is the Chahlam of Sayyid al-Shuhada. And it's a moment for us to reflect on the tragedy, but also reflect on what they give us. And Ahlul Bayt, Imam Hussein gives us life. Without Hussein alayhi salam, life doesn't have that richness, right? Life doesn't have that light in it. You see dhulm, you see oppression, you see difficulty. Karbala reminds you. And remember, there's only one Karbala. I mentioned this the other night. Karbala inspires us in every way. It inspires us to take action in injustice, wherever that may be. But there is no other day like Karbala. As Imam Hassan said, La yawmaka yawmaka ya Aba Abdullah. There is a narration from the 6th Imam where he says, Kullu yawmin ashar wa kullu ardin Karbala. There's a difference of opinion on scholar. But remember, there is only one day like Karbala. What says? Kashife sirre neha hoti hai. Kashife sirre neha hoti hai. Noke neza pe bayan hoti hai. Kashife sirre neha hoti hai. नौके नैज़ा पे बयां होती है एक खुदा उसका रसूल उसका हुसैन एक खुदा उसका रसूल उसका हुसैन करबला रोज कहाँ होती है करबला रोज कहाँ होती है. That there's only one Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, his one messenger Rasulullah, his one grandson Hussein ibn Ali. There's only one day like Karbala. And we come here to revive our hearts and say, Ya Aba Abdullah, we have not forgotten you and we will never forget you. And count us amongst your zawar, your servants, the people who are at your door. Ajrukum ala Allah. They say, the narrations say in Sham, eventually Yazid summoned Imam Sajjad. He said to call on to the son of Hussein. And when he comes, eventually he says after some time that I have decided to release you. I have decided to allow you to leave. The political turmoil had made it very difficult for this individual Yazid to continue in the way he was continuing, because people heard that the Ahlul Bayt were in the dungeons and the prisons of Sham. He said, I have decided to alleviate you. I have decided to allow you to leave. At that point, the Imam, he says, very well. Eventually, he says, I must talk to my Aunt Zainab about this. Of course, Imam is Imam, but he's saying a principle and a precedent in terms of understanding the dynamics. Imam Sajjad comes back. He says, my Aunt Zainab, we have been granted release. We have been granted that we are allowed to leave from here. At that point in time, Bibi Zainab, when she hears this, it's as if she says to Imam Sajjad, she says, O Sajjad, O Zainul Abidin, I am not going anywhere until I do the majlis of my brother Hussein ibn Ali, until I commemorate my brother Hussein ibn Ali. It's been some time. I haven't even been able to mourn him. I haven't even been able to remember his tragedy. I haven't even been able to properly cry on my brother, this brother who Zainab loved so dearly. He said, eventually, Bibi Zainab says, make arrangements, tell him to make arrangements for us. Imam Sajjad conveys the message. When he conveys the message, they make arrangements. They give a room to the Ahlul Bayt so that they can do the commemorations of Sayyidul Shuhada. Eventually, what happens is they have a majlis, and in this majlis, the looted property that had been taken from the Ahlul Bayt, they say some of it was returned to the Ahlul Bayt. They got those things one by one. The mothers are sitting there. Eventually, they say that there is a moment when amongst the things that have been looted, the heads of the Shuhada begin to emerge. When the heads of the Shuhada begin to emerge, they begin to pass them one onto the other, one by one, from one to the other. Eventually, they try to give it to the mothers. Eventually, the head of Qasim comes. Farwa takes the head into her hands. Eventually, the head of Ali Akbar comes. Layla takes the head. She hugs her son's head. Eventually, there comes the head of Abul Fadl al-Abbas. And at that point in time, eventually there comes the head of Hussein ibn Ali. They say it is as if Zainab takes this into her arms and she hugs it. But eventually, there were two heads that remained in the corner. There was no one to cry for them. They say it seems that this mother of these two children is not here. Perhaps Zainab heard this. Perhaps Zainab heard this. Ajrukum ala Allah. Eventually there came a time where eventually they were departing from Sham. When they were departing from Sham, there came a moment where Bibi Zainab, she gathers all the women and she says, and she collects them to prepare the qafila and the caravan to depart from Sham. But eventually she notices that there is one mother who is not there. They say, where is she? She says that Zainab calls out and says, I will find her. Zainab goes back into the Zindan. She goes back into the dungeon. What does she find? She finds a mother on the grave of her daughter. May Allah never show anyone this day. This mother is Rabab. She is on the grave of Sakina. Says, Sakina, you used to ask, where do the birds fly? They fly home. Sakina, we've been released. Where are you? Let's go. Ajrukum ala Allah. Allah knows how Zainab separated Rabab from the grave of Sakina. The ladies and the family of the Ahlul Bayt, they departed from Sham, and when they went from Sham on to the way back towards Medina, eventually there came a fork in the road. There was one path to Medina, one path towards Karbala. At that junction, Imam Sajjad said, Oh Bibi Zainab, oh my Aunt Zainab, one road to Medina, one road to Karbala. Where shall you go? She said, take me to Karbala. Take me to Aba Abdin. Take me to Karbala. Take me to Karbala. They went to Karbala, and when they proceeded towards Karbala, they say Jabir ibn Abdullah al-Ansari was coming from the other side. When he was coming from the other side, eventually the Ahlul Bayt were coming. They saw each other and they met over the grave of Sayyid al-Shuhada. And when they met over the grave of Sayyid al-Shuhada, they say the mothers went to the graves of their loved ones. Perhaps Layla went to the grave of Ali Akbar. Perhaps Farwa went to the grave of Qasim. Perhaps Zainab, perhaps she went first towards the grave of Hussein, or perhaps first she went to the Al-Qama. Perhaps first she went to the Furat to show Abbas what had happened from Karbala to Kufa and Sham. This was the tragedy. Eventually, Imam Sajjad and the Ahlul Bayt were there. Jabir ibn Abdullah al-Ansari, the first Zair of the martyrdom of Sayyid al-Shuhada from the Amma, he met Imam Sajjad over the grave. And when he met Imam Sajjad over the grave of Sayyid al-Shuhada, eventually a moment came where they are in discussion. It was the first loved one that they had seen. It was the first one. You know, sometimes when you lose someone, the only thing that you want is someone to ask what's going through your heart. The poet, he explains this in this dynamic, Anis. He says, what went through the heart of Hussein when he lost his most cherished ones? Where Hussein may have said, Abbas mar gaye, Ali Akbar juda hua, humse kisi ne ye bhi na pucha ke kya hua? No one asked what went through my heart. No one asked Imam Sajjad what went through his heart. He said, Yabna Rasulillah, what did you see on the day of Ashura? He said, oh Jabir, what shall I tell you about the day of Karbala? Just know one thing. After the day of Ashura, on the 11th of Muharram, they gave a cry and they called out, run over the bodies of the Shuhada with the horses. Jabir, do you know that they ran the horse's hooves over the body of my father? Jabir, I heard the bones of my father breaking beneath the hooves of the horses. Jabir, do you know what it's like for a son to hear that and not be able to do anything? Jabir, do you know? They talked, they discussed. Eventually, the qafila and caravan gathered together again. Allah knows how they left the graves of the loved ones and the dear ones. There was one mother again. She said that I will stay here perhaps. It's perhaps better that I stay here. Imam Sajjad says, my mother, you are like my mother. Come with me. Come with us. She said, I will stay here. Who is it? Rabab. She says that I have one daughter in Sham. I have my husband Hussein here. I have my 6-month-old Yasghar here. She said, what will you do here, my mother? She says, I will tell people who come, this is the grave of Hussein. This is the grave of Abbas. This is the grave of Ali Akbar. I will clean these graves. I will look after them. He says, my mother, come with us. Eventually, Allah knows how these mothers separated. They went back towards Medina. When they got to the gate of Medina, they say that Bishr was told by Imam Sajjad that I heard you recite some poetry, and I heard that your father recites poetry. Do you also recite poetry? He said, yes. He says, tell the people in Medina that we have come to Medina, and eventually announce so they know. And he calls out and he stands in the city square and he says, Ya Ahla Yathrib, La Maqama lahu biha. Oh people of Yathrib, the old name of Medina, this is not a place to live anymore. Why? قَدْ قُتِلَ الْحُسَيْنُ بِكَرْبَلَا. They killed Hussein in Karbala. Eventually, Bibi Zainab also recites a masahib. Bibi Zainab, she comes and she says, Madinatu Jaddina, La Taqbalina. Oh Medina of our grandfather, don't accept us. Why don't accept us? Because when we left, we had Qasim, we had Ali Akbar, we had Abbas, we had Hussein ibn Ali. Today we're coming back to you. We have nothing. We have none of these moons with us. Ajrukum ala Allah. Eventually, there was a moment where there was another mother who they had to convey the news to. This mother had 4 sons who she gave in Karbala. They said, may Allah reward you for your son Abdullah. May Allah reward you for your son Jafar. Eventually, they said, may Allah reward you for your son Abbas. She kept saying, I didn't ask you about them. Tell me about Hussein. They said they killed Hussein. Who is this? This is Ummul Baneen, the mother of Abbas, who gave child after child in the way of Allah, in the way of the Ahlul Bayt. Ajrukum ala Allah. ادارو 2 جملے ختم کیا, بہت وقت لیا. آگے یہ چند لمحات آل محمد کو عطا کریں. پتہ نہیں زندگی رہتی ہے یا نہ رہے. امام زمانہ کو پرسا دیجئے, بی بی فاطمہ الزہرا کو پرسا دیجئے, اور آل محمد کو پرسا دیجئے. قیامت کا دن ہے, چہلم کا دن ہے, اربعین کا دن ہے. سید الشہداء ابا عبداللہ کیا گزر گئے اہل حرم پر. ایک مرحلہ یہ آیا جب واپس مدینے پہنچے تو کہتے ہیں کہ بی بی زینب ایک بہت بڑے عرصے تک اپنے گھر نہ گئیں. بی بی امام سجاد کے گھر میں مقیم رہی. روزانہ مجلس سید الشہداء بپا کرتی تھی بی بی زینب. ایک مرحلہ یہ آیا کہ عبداللہ ابن جعفر الطیار امام سجاد کے گھر پہنچے اور کہا, اے زین العابدین, اے سید الساجدین, اپنی پھوپھی اماں سے کہیے کہ وہ گھر آ جائیں. جب سے مدینہ پہنچی ہیں زینب گھر نہیں آئی. امام سجاد پہنچے, کہا, اے پھوپھی اماں چلو گھر چلیے. خدا جانے زینب کے دل پہ کیا گزر گئی, پتہ نہیں کون سی یادیں تھی. زینب بلند ہوئی, بنو ہاشم کا محلہ تھا. زینب امام سجاد کے گھر سے رخصت ہوئی, اپنی گھر کے جانب آگے بڑھی. گھر نظر آیا, دروازہ نظر آیا, پتہ نہیں کیا یاد آیا. زینب جو تا کربلا و کوفہ و شام تلک آن محمد کو یاد نہیں کیا. زینب نے دروازہ کھولا, 2 مصلے نظر آئے, 2 بستر نظر آئے. زینب لپٹ گئی, کہا, آن محمد میرے لخت جگر. یا حسین, یا حسین, 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 ماتم حسین.
قبر حسین الوداع, اہل وطن الوداع. سید سجاد کا تھا یہ سخن الوداع. قبر حسین الوداع, اہل وطن الوداع. ہوئی رہائی مجھے تربتیں بننے لگی, ٹوٹی ہوئی ہڈیاں جسم سے ملنے لگی قبر حسین الوداع اہل وطن الوداع سید سجاد کا تھا یہ سخن الوداع قبر میں سب سونپ کے جاتا ہے یہ بے وطن شکر ہے معبود کا مل گیا سب کو دفن قبر حسین الوداع اہل وطن الوداع بن گئی قبر تمام لکھ دیا ہر ایک پہ نام ختم ہوا یہ بھی کام آخری میرا سلام قبر حسین الوداع اہل وطن الوداع سید سجاد کا تھا یہ سخن الوداع یا حسین
یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یسرب نظر آیا 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 کلثوم نے محمل کے جو پردے کو اٹھایا یسرب نظر آیا یسرب نظر آیا یسرب نظر آیا یسرب نظر آیا اپنا تھا وطن اور اپنا تھا وطن اور پرایا نظر آیا یسرب نظر آیا یسرب نظر آیا یسرب نظر آیا یسرب نظر آیا منہ ڈھانپ کے رونے لگی احمد کی نواسی ویران سراپا تھا اللہ رے اداسی اجڑا بنی ہاشم کا اجڑا بنی ہاشم کا محلہ نظر آیا یسرب 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 نظر آیا وہ گلیاں جہاں اونو محمد کبھی کھیلے عبداللہ وہاں پھرتے تھے خاموش اکیلے ہر سمت میں بچوں کا ہر سمت میں بچوں کا سراپا نظر آیا یثرب 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 نظر آیا صغرا نے خبر پائی کہ لوٹائے مسافر خوش ہو گئی روزے پہ نبی کے ہوئی حاضر کیا سوچا تھا صغرا نے کیا سوچا تھا صغرا نے اسے کیا نظر آیا یثرب 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 نظر آیا اجڑی ہوئی ہر مانگ تھی ہر گود تھی خالی اصغر کا شلوکا تھا سکینہ کی تھی بالی عباس کا پرچم بھی عباس کا پرچم بھی اکیلا نظر آیا یثرب 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 نظر آیا صغرا نے کہا اماں سے کیوں گود ہے خالی ایک آہ بھری بانو نے کچھ منہ سے نہ بولی رونے لگی جلتا ہوا رونے لگی جلتا ہوا جھولا نظر آیا یثرب 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 نظر آیا
یا حسین
یا حسین
یا حسین
یا حسین
یا حسین
یا حسین
رونے کے لیے کافی ہے سجاد تیرا نام
رونے کے لیے کافی ہے سجاد تیرا نام
رونے کے لیے
کافی ہے سجاد تیرا نام رونے کے لیے کافی ہے سجاد تیرا نام
تو شہنشاہ درد ہے تو شہنشاہ درد ہے بتلا رہی ہے شام
رونے کے لیے کافی ہے سجاد تیرا نام رونے کے لیے کافی ہے سجاد تیرا نام
چلا بے کسوں کا کارواں بیمار لوگوں سارباں ہے سنگ سرے اوریاں شاہ لافتہ کی بیٹیاں کرب و بلا کے دشت میں کرب و بلا کے دشت میں برپا ہے کوہرام
رونے کے لیے کافی ہے سجاد تیرا نام رونے کے لیے کافی ہے سجاد تیرا نام
زینب پکارے بے وطن بھائی میرا ہے بے کفن کر دے اسے کو ہی دفن میرے ہاتھوں میں باندھی رسن ہائے کیسے سنا ہوگا
ہائے کیسے سنا ہوگا
بیمار نے پیغام
رونے کافی ہے سجاد تیرا نام رونے کے لیے کافی ہے سجاد تیرا نام
مستوروں میں ایک مرد ہے غیرت سے چہرہ زرد ہے کربل کی جمی گرد ہے زینب کا دل میں درد ہے روتا ہے سر جھکا کے
روتا ہے سر جھکا کے
کرتا نہیں کلام
رونے کے لیے کافی ہے سجاد تیرا نام رونے کے لیے کافی ہے سجاد تیرا نام
کٹ جاتے سیادوں کے سر زینب نہ جاتی در بدر بیمار کا ٹکڑے جگر روتا ہے لہو ہر نگر ہائے منزلوں پہ تڑپنا ہائے منزلوں پہ تڑپنا سجاد تیرا کام
رونے کے لیے کافی ہے سجاد تیرا نام رونے کے لیے کافی ہے سجاد تیرا نام
زندہ کی سویا خاک پر عادل لہو پوشاک پر چرچے ہوئے افلاک پر سلطانی لو لاک پر ہے جن و ملائک بھی
ہے جن و ملائک بھی
سجاد کے خدام
رونے کے لیے کافی ہے سجاد تیرا نام رونے کے لیے کافی ہے سجاد تیرا نام رونے کے لیے کافی ہے سجاد تیرا نام
یا حسین
یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین
یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین حیا علی
خیر العمل
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 یا حسین 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 الوداع 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 خواہرا خدا حافظ الوداع 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 خواہرا خدا حافظ الوداع بہن زینب 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 زینب حضی ایمن زینب حضی ایمن خواہرا خدا حافظ زینب حضی ایمن زینب حضی ایمن
خواہرا خدا حافظ
الوداع دوری دوتن الوداع دوری دوتن خواہرا خدا حافظ من کبھی علم دورم بے معین و بے یارم من کبھی علم دورم بے معین و بے یارم
از حیات بے زورم از حیات بے زورم خواہرا
خدا حافظ
زینب حزی ایمن زینب حزی ایمن
خواہرا خدا حافظ
اے میری بہن زینب گھر تیرے حوالے ہے جو لائے کے سجدہ ہے سر اس کے حوالے ہے جو لائے کے سجدہ ہے سر اس کے حوالے جو لائے کے سجدہ ہے سر اس کے حوالے ہے بس چلنے کو ہے خنجر بس چلنے کو ہے خنجر
خواہرا خدا حافظ
من کبھی علم دورم بے معین و بے یارم من کبھی علم دورم بے معین و بے یارم از حیات بے زورم از حیات بے زورم خواہرا
خدا حافظ
زینب حزی ایمن زینب حزی ایمن خواہرا
خدا حافظ
کہنا میرے نانا سے گھر بار لٹایا ہے اس طرح نواسے نے وعدے کو نبھایا ہے اس طرح نواسے نے وعدے کو نبھایا ہے سر ہے میرا نیزے پر
سر ہے میرا نیزے پر
خواہرا خدا حافظ من کبھی علم دورم بے معین و بے یارم من کبھی علم دورم بے معین
پیارم
از حیات بے زورم از حیات بے زورم خواہرا خدا
حافظ
زینب حزی ایمن زینب حزی ایمن
خواہرا خدا حافظ
تم بعد میرے زینب مشکل سے نہ گھبرانا عباس جری بن کر ہر ظلم سے ٹکرانا عباس جری بن کر ہر ظلم سے ٹکرانا ہے جون و دل حیدر اے جون و
دل حیدر
خواہرا خدا حافظ من کبھی علم دورم بے معین و بے یارم من کبھی علم دورم بے معین و بے یارم از حیات بے زورم از حیات بے زورم خواہرا
خدا حافظ
زینب حزی ایمن زینب حزی ایمن
خواہرا خدا حافظ
زینب میری بیٹی کو ہر غم سے بچا لینا جب روئے سکینہ تو گودی میں سلا لینا جب روئے سکینہ تو گودی میں سلا لینا کم سن ہے میری دختر کم سن ہے میری دختر
خواہرا خدا حافظ
من کبھی علم دورم بے معین و بے یارم من کبھی علم دورم بے معین و بے یارم از حیات بے زورم از حیات بے زورم
خواہرا خدا حافظ
الوداع دوری دو تن الوداع دوری دو تن خواہرا
خدا حافظ
زینب حزی ایمن زینب حزی ایمن خواہرا خدا
حافظ
الوداع 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 خواہرا خدا حافظ
خواہرا خدا حافظ
یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین
یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین
یا حسین
یا حسین
یا حسین
یا حسین
یا حسین
یا حسین
یا حسین
یا حسین
حسین تیرے لہو کی خوشبو حسین تیرے لہو کی خوشبو فلک دامن سے آ رہی ہے فلک دامن سے آ رہی ہے حسین تیرے لہو کی خوشبو حسین تیرے لہو کی خوشبو فلک دامن سے آ رہی ہے فلک دامن
سے آ رہی ہے
یہ خون ناحق چھپے گا کیوں کر یہ خون ناحق چھپے گا کیوں کر جسے یہ دنیا چھپا رہی ہے جسے یہ دنیا چھپا رہی ہے حسین تیرے لہو کی خوشبو حسین تیرے لہو کی خوشبو فلک
دامن سے آ رہی ہے
فلک دامن سے آ رہی ہے قبول کرنا سر کا کٹانا مگر نہ باطل سے خوف کھانا بھول کرنا سر کا کٹانا باطل سے خوف کھانا سمجھ سکے تو سن لے زمانہ سمجھ سکے تو سن لے زمانہ صدا یہ پیاسوں کی آ رہی ہے صدا یہ
پیاسوں کی آ رہی ہے
حسین تیرے لہو کی خوشبو حسین تیرے لہو کی خوشبو فلک کے دامن سے آ رہی ہے فلک
کے دامن سے آ رہی ہے
حسین لاشا جواں کا لے کر چلے ہے مقتل سے سوئے خیمہ حسین لاشا جواں کا لے کر چلے ہے مقتل سے سوئے خیمہ مگر ضعیفی قدم قدم پر مگر ضعیفی قدم قدم پر اٹھا رہی ہے بٹھا رہی ہے اٹھا رہی ہے بٹھا رہی ہے حسین تیرے لہو کی خوشبو حسین تیرے لہو کی خوشبو فلک دامن سے آ رہی ہے فلک دامن سے آ رہی ہے جناب آدم جناب عیسیٰ رسول اکرم غرض کے دنیا جناب آدم جناب عیسیٰ رسول اکرم غرض کے دنیا حسین ابن علی کے غم میں حسین ابن علی کے غم میں اجل بھی آنسو بہا رہی ہے اجل بھی آنسو بہا رہی ہے حسین تیرے لہو کی خوشبو حسین تیرے لہو کی خوشبو فلک کے دامن سے آ رہی ہے فلک کے دامن سے آ رہی ہے یہ کون ہے جس کی گفتگو میں علی کا لہجہ جھلک رہا ہے یہ کون ہے جس کی گفتگو میں علی کا لہجہ جھلک رہا ہے یہ کون ہے جس کے ولولوں سے یہ کون ہے جس کے ولولوں سے حسینیت جگمگا رہی ہے حسینیت جگمگا رہی ہے حسین تیرے لہو کی خوشبو حسین تیرے لہو کی خوشبو فلک کے دامن سے آ رہی ہے فلک کے دامن سے آ رہی ہے یہ خون ناحق چھپے گا کیوں کر یہ خون ناحق چھپے گا کیوں کر جسے یہ دنیا چھپا رہی ہے جسے یہ دنیا چھپا رہی ہے حسین تیرے لہو کی خوشبو حسین تیرے لہو کی خوشبو فلک کے دامن سے آ رہی ہے فلک کے دامن سے آ رہی ہے یا حسین
یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین
یا حسین
یا حسین
یا حسین
یا حسین
یا حسین
یا حسین
الوداع الوداع یا حسین الوداع 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 یا حسین الوداع اے درو بطول کے نور عین الوداع 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 یا حسین الوداع 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 یا حسین الوداع ماہ غم گزر گیا غم تیرا نہ کر سکے مجلس حسین تیرا حق ادا نہ کر سکے ایک ایک اشک غم کا ہے یہ بین الوداع 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 یا حسین الوداع 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 یا حسین الوداع دل لہو لہو کیا اشک سے وضو کیا تذکرہ حسین کا یوں تو چار سو کیا اٹھ رہا ہے اب مگر دل کا چین الوداع 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 یا حسین الوداع 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 یا حسین الوداع مجلسوں کی رونقیں اب کہاں ملے ہمیں کس زباں سے الوداع اہل غم کہیں تمہیں اے شعور غم کے شاہ مشرقین الوداع 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 یا حسین الوداع تشنہ لب شہ ہدا اے شہید کربلا، آنکھ تر نہ ہو سکی ماہ غم گزر گیا، چشم غم سے کیوں نہ برسے خون کا عین الوداع،
الوداع الوداع
یا حسین الوداع الوداع الوداع،
یا حسین الوداع۔
ماتمی لباس میں مرد و زن تھے نوح غر، تیرے غم میں شاد تھے اپنے غم سے بے خبر، ختم غم کی ہوتی ہے زیب و زین الوداع،
الوداع الوداع یا حسین الوداع
الوداع الوداع یا حسین،
الوداع۔
بس ریحان نوح گر ہو گیا لہو جگر، سال بھر کے واسطے دے پیام مختصر، فاطمہ کے جان و تن اے حسین الوداع،
الوداع
الوداع یا حسین الوداع، الوداع الوداع یا حسین الوداع، الوداع الوداع یا حسین الوداع، یا حسین
یا حسین
یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین، اللہم صلی علی محمد۔
We'll do the Ziyat Arbaeen.
اعوذ باللہ من الشیطان الرجیم، بسم اللہ الرحمن الرحیم۔ السلام علیک یا رسول اللہ، السلام علیک یا امیر المؤمنین، السلام علیک یا فاطمۃ الزہراء سیدۃ نساء العالمین، السلام علیک یا حسن المجتبی، السلام علیک یا ابا عبد اللہ، وعلی الارواح التي حلت بفنائک، علیکم منی جميعا سلام اللہ ابدا ما بقیت بقی اللیل والنہار، ولا جعلہ اللہ آخر العہد منی لزیارتکم۔ السلام علی الحسین وعلی علی ابن الحسین وعلی اولاد الحسین وعلی صحاب الحسین۔ السلام علیکم ورحمۃ اللہ وبرکاتہ۔ زیارت الاربعین۔ بسم اللہ الرحمن الرحیم۔ السلام علی ولی اللہ وحبیبہ، السلام علی خلیل اللہ ونجیبہ، السلام علی صفی اللہ وابن صفیہ، السلام علی الحسین المظلوم الشہید، السلام علی العسیر القربات وقتیل العبرات۔ اللہم انی اشہد انہ ولیک وابن ولیک وصفیک وابن صفیک، الفائض بکرامتک، اکرمتہ بالشہادت وحبوتہ بالسعادت واجتبیتہ بطیب الولادت وجعلتہ سیدا من السادات وقائدا من القادات وزائدا من الزادات، وآتیتہ مواریث الانبیاء وجعلتہ حجتا علی خلقک من الاوصیاء، فعزر فی الدعاء ومنح النصح وبذل محجتا فیک لیستنقذ عبادک من الجہالۃ وحیرۃ الضلالہ، وقد توازر علیہ من غرتہ الدنیا وباہظہ بالارذل الادنی، وشرى آخرتہ بالثمن الاوکس، وتغترس وترد في هواه وأسخطك وأسخط نبيك، وأطاع من عبادك أهل الشقاق والنفاق وحملة الأوزار المستوجبين النار، فجاهدهم فيك صابرا محتسبا حتى سفك في طاعتك دمه واستبيح حريمه، اللهم فلعنهم لعنا وبيلا وعذبهم عذابا أليما۔ السلام عليك يا ابن رسول الله، السلام عليك يا ابن سيد الأوصياء، أشهد أنك أمين الله وابن أمينه، عشت سعيدا ومضيت حميدا ومتفقدا مظلوما شهيدا، وأشهد أن الله منجز ما وعدك ومهلك من خذلك ومعذب من قتلك، وأشهد أنك وفيت بعهد الله وجاهدت في سبيله حتى أتاك اليقين، فلعن الله من قتلك ولعن الله من ظلمك ولعن الله أمة سمعت بذلك فرزيت به. اللهم إني أشهدك أني ولي لمن والاه وعدو لمن عاداه بأبي أنت وأمي يا ابن رسول الله. أشهد أنك كنت نورا في الأسلاب الشامخة والأرحام المطهرة لم تنجسك الجاهلية بأنجاسها ولم تلبسك من مدلهمات ثيابها. وأشهد أنك من دعائم الدين وأركان المسلمين ومعقل المؤمنين. وأشهد أنك الإمام البر التقي الرزي الزكي الهادي المهدي. وأشهد أن الأئمة من ولك كلمة التقوى وأعلام الهدى والعروة الوثقى والحجة على أهل الدنيا. وأشهد أني بكم مؤمن وبيا بكم موقن بشرع ديني وخواتم عملي وقلبي لقلبكم سلم وأمري لأمركم متبع ونصرتي لكم معدة حتى يأذن الله لكم. فمعكم لا مع عدوكم صلوات الله عليكم وعلى أرواحكم وأجسادكم وشاهدكم وغائبكم وظاهركم وباطنكم آمين رب العالمين. السلام عليك يا مولاي وابن مولاي. السلام عليك يا غريب الغرباء. السلام عليك يا معين الضعفاء والفقراء. السلام عليك يا شمس السموس وعنيس النفوس. السلام عليك يا سلطان أبا الحسن علي بن موسى الرضا ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا مولاي صاحب العصر والزمان. الأمان 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 من فتنة الزمان. السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن. السلام عليك يا خليفة الرحمن. السلام عليك يا مظهر الإيمان. السلام عليك يا قاطع البرهان. السلام عليك يا إمام زماننا. هذا أجل الله تعالى فرجك وسهل الله تعالى مخرجك وظهورك. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم كل وليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه عرزك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم صل على محمد.